I was hoping I'd be able to squeeze out a couple of videos here while they were back there, but that just didn't happen. Anyway, where was I? So we hear the term the time of the end, and we just immediately think of the end of the world and Armageddon and all that good stuff, but that is not what, that doesn't mean anything. Time of the end just means time of the end of anything. While he was speaking to me, I was in a deep sleep with my face to the ground. I'm assuming he was unconscious or something along those lines. Then he touched me and raised me to my feet. He said, I am going to tell you what will happen later in the time of wrath, because the vision concerns the appointed time of the end. So there's another time of the end referring to him. Or the footnote says you could also render this phrase, because the end will come at the appointed time. Again, we're not talking about the end of the world. We're talking about the end of the Grecian Empire's dominance over Israel, which happens in the years after this little horn does his thing. The two-horned ram that you saw at the beginning of the vision represents the kings of Media and Persia. So let's go back to that. Okay, so let's go back to that and see what they say about that. There before me was a ram with two horns standing beside the canal, and the horns were long. One of the horns was longer than the other, but grew up later. So one of the kings is dominant, but not at first. That would be Persia. Media was the dominant half of this empire at the beginning, but Persia overcame it eventually. Remember, Darius the Mede is a Median. I mean, we specifically talked about him as being a Mede. He's Darius the Mede. He's not Darius the Persian. Cyrus was a Persian. So, and Darius the Mede is probably the last of the kings of the Medes to rule this empire. And he seems to have been Cyrus's uncle or something along those lines. And, of course, Darius is a throne name, so he had another name. So when you look at the inscriptions, you need to find another name and apply it to this guy, because it's not going to be Darius. And he was a Mede, clearly. Many times referred to as Darius the Mede. After he's gone, Cyrus takes complete control. He had been the general of the armies. After Darius the Mede dies, he only reigned for a couple of years. So Cyrus is the official top dog in the whole empire. He's a Persian, and it will be a Persian-dominated empire from that point onward. So the meaning of the two horns is that one of the horns will grow up longer, but later. One horn will be dominant at first, but the other horn will be dominant later on. And he went to the west, the north, and the south, because he already came from the east, and he ruled the world for about 200 years. And he will go against the west. He will try to take out Greece, and eventually Greece will come and take him out after a couple centuries of that. The shaggy goat is the king of Greece. This was Alexander the Great, who will finally conquer Persia in the 330s BC, 200 plus years from now. And the large horn between his eyes is the first king. That's Alexander the Great. The four horns that replace the one that was broken off, because Alexander the Great gets broken off, represent four kingdoms that will emerge from his nation but will not have the same power. Alexander the Great dies prematurely on his way back from India. He's in Babylon, so he goes all the way from Greece to India, conquers all the world in between, and eventually he wears out his army. And they do this like all within the span of about 10 years. So in the span of about 10 years, he conquers everything from Greece to India, and he eventually just wears out his army so much they want to go home, and he eventually agrees. He eventually decides to do so before they turn on him. So they turn around and head back west, and in Babylon he dies. And after, he's only like 33 or something like that years old. I mean, he was a young man when he died. He really didn't get to enjoy the fruits of his labor, because he spent 10 years conquering the world and then died immediately before he even got to go home and enjoy being the emperor of Earth. So, Alexander the Great dies prematurely when he's still a young man on his way back from all his conquests, never got a chance to enjoy his conquest, and none of his successors are powerful enough to take over the entire empire that he conquered. So they basically ends up after a course of strife and fighting, of course, in the hands of four separate generals who rule four different divisions of this empire. We're only really going to focus on two of them. Two of them are out in Greece and Macedonia, and just too far away to really be a direct threat to Israel. The two of them are going to be a major threat to Israel. And again, we're only really focused on Israel here. So we're not really worried about the two branches of the empire that are off in Europe and on the coastlands of the Mediterranean Sea. They're just kind of too far away to be a direct influence on Israel. But we are concerned about the kings to the north and south of Israel. One's going to be the north of Israel in Syria, one's going to be the south of Israel in Egypt, and they're going to have a lot to do with Israel during this time. So 4 horns are the 4 divisions of the empire that end up settling into place after Alexander the Great dies prematurely. In the latter part of their reign, so a couple hundred years later, when rebels have become completely wicked, a stern-faced king, a master of intrigue, will arise. Part of the reason why this is the time of the end and the latter part of the reign is because this is the end of God's interest in this kingdom. This guy will be the end of God's interest in the Grecian kingdom as a threat to Israel. Because once they actually oust him, or once he's gone, Israel actually regains independence for about 100 years. The Grecian Empire itself will continue lingering on until the Romans completely take it over 100 years in the 1st century BC. But as far as Israel is concerned, the Grecian Empire is no longer the ruling force after this king comes and goes. A stern-faced king, a master of intrigue, will arise. He'll become very strong, but not by his own power. He will cause astounding devastation. We'll read more about him in chapter 11. We're going to zero in on this guy and detail his career in significant detail in chapter 6. This is not the last time we're going to talk about this dude. He will cause astounding devastation and will succeed in whatever he does. He will destroy the mighty men and the holy people. So he's going to fight against the people of God. Not in the way that Nebuchadnezzar did or in a way that Darius did. Part of the reason why the logic of this, people want to say this book was written during the time of this king. This king is Antiochus Epiphanes. He comes along in the 170s, 160s BC. And of course, the smart people today will tell you this book was written during this time to encourage the people who are suffering under his reign. But the problem with this logic is that the examples we have earlier in the book of the holy people suffering under wicked kings, the wicked kings are not directly fighting the holy people for the sake of fighting them. Nebuchadnezzar did not attack Jerusalem just for the sake of taking out the evil of God. Darius did not issue his decree to throw people in the lion's den just for the sake of... Now, Daniel's enemies wrote a law just so that Daniel would break it, so they could get rid of Daniel. But it was not a program or a program of destruction directed specifically against the people of God. So the logic doesn't even really follow. Like the situations don't even really match each other. Because this guy will specifically go after people who worship Jehovah. He is going to go after them and try to get them to change and fight them. And that is going to be like his specific motivation during this time. He will cause deceit to prosper, and he will consider himself superior. We have a lot of leaders like that who do that today, don't we? When they feel, we have a guy named Anthony Fauci who's leaving office right now who fits that description pretty accurately, I would say. When they feel secure, he will destroy many and take his stand against the Prince of Princes. So he's going to fight. He's not going to fight God directly. Okay, he's not going to go up to heaven and launch an invasion of heaven. All right, he's going to fight God by fighting his hosts here on earth. So those starry hosts that get brought down low, those are not angels. From several verses ago, those are not angels. All right, those are people. Those are righteous people, righteous leaders who are genuinely following Jehovah at this time. And he's fighting them. So he's waging war against the Prince of Princes and the Lord of Hosts by taking it out on his people here on earth, not by marching into heaven and taking out the angels or anything like that. Yet he will be destroyed, but not by human power. This guy is not going to die in battle or be assassinated. He'll die, but not directly by human means. The vision of the evenings and mornings that has been given you is true. But seal up the vision, for it concerns the distant future. Now, that doesn't mean to hide it. Okay, sealing up the vision doesn't mean to hide it. It means to preserve it. So remember, because they wrote this stuff on scrolls, and when they finished writing their scrolls, they would seal them up for preservation for the future. So sealing up the vision, sealing up the scroll, does not mean to hide it. Now, it's true that as long as the scroll is sealed, no one can read it. But the purpose of sealing up the vision isn't necessarily to conceal it, as much as it is to preserve it, so that when the relevant time comes, the people will know. For it concerns the distant future. It's not going to happen anytime soon. This is the 160s BC. Daniel is sitting here in the year 550 BC. So this is close to 400 years in his future. I, Daniel, was exhausted and lay ill for several days. Then I got up and went about the king's business. So here in the third year of Belshazzar, he apparently was still an administrator in some kind or another in the kingdom. Now, by the time Belshazzar dies, in chapter 5 we see that, Daniel seems to have been forgotten or maybe retired somehow or whatever. But it seems that here, 10 years earlier, in 550 BC or so, Daniel was still a servant in the kingdom and doing stuff for the king. I was appalled by the vision. It was beyond understanding. He had just been given the understanding by the angel that he couldn't wrap his head around it. It was just so appalling, he couldn't believe it. What was going to happen to the people of his day was just so, of that day, his people of that day was just so bad he couldn't believe it. The other thing to mention here, this video is getting pretty long, but at least I managed to get all of chapter 8 in one video. I might go back and edit out the parts with the cats. Shorten the video somewhat. Of the 2,300 days, there's two possible ways that this means anything. First of all, I don't believe we have enough information. Okay, first of all, I do think this 2,300 evenings and mornings does refer to a specific period of time that happened in history. Secondly, I don't believe we have enough, that light is flickering, I'm going to put a light in that light bulb after this video. I don't believe we have enough information historically available to us to specifically state when this time period began and ended. Thirdly, so we're going to have to accept that. I don't believe we can actually specifically say this is a date. I think we have a terminus date, maybe, the 25th of, well, in our calendars, it would be December 25th, 164 BC. That was the day they rededicated the temple after it had been defiled. But that may be the terminus date, but I don't know if we have the starting date. I guess you could count back, 1200. Well, okay, so here's the other thing. We don't really know what the 2300 refers to. Some people will tell you the evenings and mornings refers to a day, so that means 2300 days, which is about 6 and something years. And that's possible. In Genesis, the account of creation is given to us in the terms of evenings and mornings, which make up days. So we do have precedent in the scriptures for viewing an evening-morning period as being a day. However, this specific vision is about the daily sacrifice and the abolishment and suspension of the daily sacrifice, which happened twice a day, as I read earlier. So it could be how many daily sacrifices are going to be missed, which is 2,300, which that is actually twice a day. So the number of days we're talking about is actually half of 2,300, which is 1,150. So we could be looking at a time period of 1,150 days, because that equals 2,300 missed daily sacrifices. So it's either 2,300 days in the sense of evening and morning being a day, or 1,150 days in the sense of missed daily sacrifices, and those happen twice a day. I tend to think it's actually the 1,150 days, because the context seems to be specifically about the evening and morning sacrifices, the daily sacrifices being suspended. And that was restarted. So the temple was cleansed on December 25th, 164 BC, according to our calendars. And whenever, I guess, they started, and that would be, I guess, the terminus date, like that, that's the ending point of this period of time. So you go back 1150 days, and I guess that's when it began. However, I don't believe we have, the information that we get for this is in places like 1st and 2nd Maccabees, which talks about this period of time. And I don't believe the information we find in there is detailed enough for us to state precisely when this time period began. I think we may be able to say when it ended, but I don't know if we can say when it began. This ties up also with the figures at the very end of the book of Daniel, which we'll cover when we get to the end of the book of Daniel. But this is a period of time when the temple, which is going to be rebuilt, when Daniel sees this vision, there is no temple. Daniel is talking at a time. He's seeing this vision at a point in time when there is no temple. Daniel is not going to live long enough to see another temple built. The temple won't be built until in 516 BC, which is 20 years after we know Daniel was alive, and I doubt he lived 20 more years after that. So he never saw another temple. But it will be rebuilt, and there's going to come a point in time after that, in the latter days of these kings that rule over Israel at this time, that this daily sacrifices will be made to cease because the wicked king is going to stop them and actually desecrate the temple by setting up an idol to Jupiter in there. And we'll read about that in more detail in Daniel chapter 11. So that is that. And after they get rid of those guys, the Jews are actually going to regain their independence again for about another century or so. So that also explains why this is the time of the end, because that's going to be the time of the end of the Grecian Empire's dominance over the beautiful land.